His hand was on my throat, not to hurt, just to hold, like he was anchoring himself to something real. My breath hitched. His eyes didn't blink. "You were only supposed to be a contract," he said. "But now I can't stop needing you. Want more? Like, subscribe and stay close." The story's just getting started. I didn't expect my life to change in an elevator. It was old, brass-trimmed, and so silent it felt like it could hear my thoughts. I stood there, alone, clutching my coat like it was armor, heart pounding with the realization that I was about to meet the man who could either save my mother or crush what little was left of us. The doors opened with a whisper. The air inside. Hale & Co.'s top-floor suite didn't feel like air. It felt like a verdict. Polished wood, the faint scent of cedar and leather, a skyline view so sharp it made me feel small just standing near it. I stepped inside, every footstep echoing on marble like I was trespassing into a life I didn't belong in. He was already waiting. Sebastian Hale didn't look up when I entered. He was seated behind a desk so large and intimidating it could have doubled as a courtroom bench. He wore a black suit, no tie, shirt unbuttoned just enough to reveal the hard line of his throat. His hair was dark, slightly tousled, as if even sleep didn't dare tame it. And his hands, strong, precise, held a single piece of paper. "Miss Tran," he said without preamble, his voice low and metallic. "Sit." I sat. I was used to being invisible, but this man made me feel like glass. Not fragile, just see-through. "I understand your mother owes $642,000 to Red Hawk Holdings. They called in the debt after your father's default. He passed away last year, correct?" I nodded. "Yes." He didn't blink. "You will not be able to repay that amount. Not in time." "I know," I said, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. Silence. Then he slid the paper toward me. "Then we're here to negotiate." I looked down. It wasn't what I expected. No threats, no invoices, no terms of repayment. Just one line, printed neatly across the center in bold black type. In exchange for full debt forgiveness, the undersigned agrees to give Sebastian Hale one hug. One time. No further contact. No repetition. Duration. 1 minute, I stared at it, then at him. "You're joking." He looked up at me for the first time. His eyes were steel, gray-blue and expressionless, yet somehow charged, like static before lightning. "I don't joke," he said. "I don't understand." "You don't have to," he replied coolly. "You just have to sign." This was insane. Who writes a contract for a hug? I couldn't wrap my head around it. I kept searching his face for a clue, a tell, anything that would explain this surreal moment. But all I saw was perfect control, like a man who'd erased the need to feel anything long ago. "It's just a hug?" I whispered. "Yes." "No. Touch beyond that?" "No." "And after that? You leave. Your mother's debt disappears. End of transaction." I gripped the edge of the chair. My heart thudded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "Why me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back slightly, shadows sharpening the line of his jaw. "I could tell you," he said softly. "But then you might hesitate, and hesitation costs time. You don't have much of that left." He was right. The bank had given us a final notice, 7 days. After that, the shop was gone, and my mother, who hadn't smiled in a year, would lose the last thing my father ever left her. I looked back at the paper. Just a hug. But why did it feel like I was standing at the edge of something irreversible? "I don't want anything else," I said quietly. "No one touches me unless I say yes." His gaze sharpened. Not offended, but something else. Briefly, a flicker passed across his face. Recognition, regret. He nodded once. You'll be safe. This is strictly transactional. But it didn't feel transactional. It felt like bait. And stupid, desperate, terrified me, was already halfway into the trap. Still, I signed. My hand shook slightly as I put the pen to paper. My name looked so out of place beneath his, soft curves against sharp precision. When I looked up, he was already standing. We'll hold a private ceremony this Friday, he said. Ceremony? It's a legal formality, he added flatly. You'll be compensated. I'll handle the logistics. You show up, play the part, deliver what was agreed. Play the part. It should have sounded like protection. Instead, it sounded like surrender. I rose slowly. My legs felt numb. The room felt colder than when I entered, even though the thermostat hadn't moved. He walked me to the door without a word, and as his fingers brushed the knob, he finally spoke again. Don't be late. The doors closed, behind me, and the elevator began its descent. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't fall apart. I just stood there, watching my reflection blur in the golden elevator walls, and asked myself the only question that mattered now. Why does something as small as a hug feel like I just gave him everything? I arrived at the church 20 minutes early and still felt late. The sky was overcast, the kind of gray that made everything look muted, like the city had pressed pause. I stood on the front steps of St. Agnes Chapel in a borrowed dress that didn't quite fit, hugging a coat too thin for November. The hem of my dress fluttered in the wind. I had sewn it myself, but somehow it didn't feel like mine. There were no flowers, no music, no guests, just an empty aisle lined with cold pews and a ceiling too high for someone like me to belong beneath. Light streamed through the stained glass, windows, washing the room in crimson and gold. But even that felt borrowed, like it had been meant for someone else's day. A man in a black suit waited by the altar. Tall, still, untouchable. Sebastian Hale. He didn't move when I entered. Didn't glance back. Just stood there, hands clasped in front of him, like he was preparing for a meeting, not a wedding. My heels echoed across the marble. I reached the altar with my breath held somewhere in my throat. This is insane, I whispered. Yes, he agreed. And binding. The officiant, a discreet man in his 50s, probably paid generously to ask no questions, began the briefest ceremony I'd ever witnessed. There were no vows, no ring exchange, no kiss, just 2 names read aloud, followed by 2 signatures and a line that made my stomach turn. This union is entered in accordance with private contractual terms. That was it. No applause, no celebration. Just the sound of my pen scratching across paper again, like déjà vu from a nightmare I had already lived once. I half expected him to vanish right after. But he didn't. Sebastian offered me his arm, mechanically, like a man escorting a stranger to her execution. I took it, because I didn't know what else to do. A car waited outside. A sleek black vehicle with tinted windows and no driver in sight. As we stepped inside, the door clicked shut behind us with the finality of a cell door. He sat beside me, silent. I tried to breathe, but the air in the car was thick with something I couldn't name. Not perfume, not cologne. Something darker. Control. Power. Restraint. I risked a glance sideways. He was staring straight ahead, jaw tight, brow unreadable. His suit looked like it had been tailored to the shape of silence itself. His presence took up the entire car, and still left space empty between us. What happens now? I asked quietly. You come with me. We fulfill the contract. His voice was flat. There was no suggestion in it, no emotion, just fact. Still, The word fulfill felt heavier than it should have. We drove uptown, past streets I'd never set foot on. Townhouses with gold doorknobs, stores that didn't list prices. People who walked like nothing could touch them. And then the car turned into an underground garage, rising into a penthouse that redefined what space meant in Manhattan. Glass walls, white marble floors, a fireplace already lit. It looked more like an art museum than a home. "This way," he said. I followed him through a hallway into a bedroom that could have belonged to a king or a ghost. Everything was immaculate, cold, large enough for echoes. He stopped at the edge of the room, turned toward me, and finally met my eyes. "We do this now," he said. "The hug?" I asked, though I already knew. He nodded once. "Just the hug." I swallowed. "And then?" "I take you home. Your debt is cleared. You never see me again." For some reason, that last part felt like a bruise before it even landed. I took a step closer. He opened his arms. Slow. Deliberate. Like he'd done this before but had forgotten how to mean it. I stepped into them. He was warm. Not in a comforting way. More like fire behind a locked door, dangerous if you stayed too long. His arms wrapped around me, cautious at first, then tighter. His hand settled at the small of my back. My face pressed against his chest, and I could hear the beat of his heart. Steady, slow, infuriatingly calm. I expected discomfort, awkwardness. But what I felt instead was heat, not attraction, not affection. Just something raw, something alive. The timer in my mind began counting down from 60, 59, 58. Then his hand moved slightly, a shift in pressure. A breath caught between us. The space shrank. 43, 42. I felt it when he inhaled, when his hand curved against my spine, just barely. When his lips lowered, not to kiss, but to whisper. "You feel real. 22, 21. I froze. His voice wasn't cold. It was hollow, wounded. 10, 9. My fingers clenched against his suit. He didn't let go. I felt the minute pass. But he didn't move. Neither did I. Then, his voice again, low, like breaking glass. I told myself it would be enough. And with that, he stepped back. The room felt colder. "I'll have the car take you home," he said, already turning away. "You fulfilled your part." I didn't answer, because even though he was letting me go, something inside me wasn't walking out with me. I didn't go straight home. I told the driver to take the long way, even though it was cold and getting darker by the minute. I just couldn't go back. Not yet. Not like this. Not with my skin still humming from a 1-minute embrace that felt like it had cracked open a locked vault inside me. My mother called twice. I let it ring both times. What would I even say? "Hi, Mom. I hugged a billionaire and signed away my dignity, but don't worry, the debt's gone. We're saved." No, not yet. I leaned my head against the cool window of the car. The city blurred past, but my mind was trapped in that room. In his arms. In that second, no, those seconds he refused to let go. He'd said it would be 60 seconds, 1 minute. One hug, but it wasn't. He held me longer. He whispered. He broke his own rule, and I let him. The next morning, I woke up feeling hollow. My mother was humming in the kitchen, her way of coping. She didn't ask me anything. Maybe she thought not. Asking made it easier for me to pretend it had been just business. But it didn't feel like business. Not anymore. I tried to go back to work at the shop, to lose myself in fabric and thread. But even the rhythm of the sewing machine couldn't drown out the sound of his voice from the night before. You feel real. Why had he said that? And why did it make my hands shake now? 3 days passed. I told myself that was it. We had a deal. I'd held up my end. He was a man of contracts and clauses and clean exits. But on the 4th day, a delivery arrived. Not flowers, not a thank you. A box. Inside, a coat. Wool. Custom cut. Deep forest green with silk lining, hand-stitched at the seams, far too expensive for someone like me. There was no note, just a tag. Don't freeze. H. My chest tightened. It wasn't a gift. It was a reminder of that moment, that room, that touch. Later that evening, I was walking back from the train when I saw him. Sebastian. Across the street. Standing beside a black car like he didn't belong on Earth, like he'd stepped out of a dream I hadn't asked for. Our eyes met. He didn't wave, didn't smile. Just looked. Then turned and walked away. That should have been the end of it. But I crossed the street. Wait, I called after him. He stopped but didn't turn. I caught up. Why are you here? Why do you think? His voice was quiet, but sharp enough to cut glass. I folded my arms. The contract is done. You said, no more. I know. Then what is this? He looked at me then, really looked, and suddenly I wasn't just some girl in a borrowed coat. I wasn't background noise in his perfect world. I was center frame. I thought the hug would be enough, he said. It wasn't. Silence stretched between us like a live wire. I didn't ask for more. I whispered. I know, he said again, this time with something softer under the steel. But you gave more. I took a step back. What are you trying to say? That I'm not done feeling you yet. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept hearing it over and over in my head. I'm not done feeling you yet. No one had ever said anything like that to me. Not like that. Not with that look. That storm behind his eyes, as if wanting me had ruined something inside him. I tried to pretend I wasn't affected. I failed. 2 days later, I was in the shop late, fixing a hem, when the bell chimed. It was almost closing time. I didn't look up at first. I need your help, the voice said. My hand froze. Sebastian Hale, standing in a cramped Queen's tailor shop like it was the most natural thing in the world. He held up a jacket. You stitched this, didn't you? I nodded. Custom order. Italian wool. It tore. I frowned. You must have yanked it wrong. His lips lifted, barely. Maybe I wasn't gentle enough. There was something electric in the air. Then, a charge I couldn't shake. He stepped closer. I stepped back. He placed the jacket on the counter, then didn't move. You shouldn't be here, I said. I know. I have nothing else to give you. That's not why I'm here. Then why? Because when I held you, he said quietly, I felt something I haven't felt in 10 years. And it scared me. I couldn't breathe. And the worst part, he continued, voice like thunder held back by clouds. It wasn't just the way you felt in my arms. It was the way I felt when I let go. He looked down, like a man remembering a dream that shouldn't have meant anything. But it did. I should have told him to leave. Should have reminded him that what we shared was written on paper, not in blood, but I didn't. Because some part of me, stupid, dangerous, human, didn't want him to leave. Some part of me had started craving the echo of him, his silence, his heat, his arms, even his rules. Because the moment he broke them, so did I. I didn't tell anyone that he came to the shop. What would I say? That the man who bought a hug showed up asking me to mend his jacket and nearly cracked open something I'd been trying to keep buried? It sounded ridiculous. Worse, it sounded dangerous. But that night, I found myself replaying everything. His words, his eyes, the way his voice faltered just once when he said, "It scared me." Men like Sebastian, Hale weren't supposed to get scared, and yet, he did. Because of me. The next day, I received a message on my phone. No name, no number. Just 4 p.m. 71st and Park. Come if you want the truth. My thumb hovered over the screen. I didn't reply, but I went. It was an office building in the Upper East Side. Sleek, silent. The kind of place that didn't advertise itself. The receptionist didn't ask for my name, just pressed a button and told me to take the elevator to the 18th floor. The doors opened into a private study. Sebastian stood by the window, looking out over Manhattan like he owned it. And maybe he did. He didn't. "Turn around, you came." "You said truth," I replied. "I don't like being left in the dark." He nodded, but said nothing. I stepped farther into the room. Books lined the shelves in perfect symmetry. A decanter of whiskey sat untouched beside 2 glasses. The air smelled like cedar, leather, and thyme. "You asked why I wrote that contract," he finally said, still facing away. "I did, and you deserve the answer." He turned. The mask was still there. The polished man, the sharp jawline, the perfect posture. But his eyes, something had shifted. Like they'd stopped hiding and started mourning. "I lost someone," he said simply. "Years ago." "A wife?" I guessed. He gave a humorless half-smile. "Legally, yes. In every other way, no. She was beautiful, brilliant. She wanted things I didn't see coming." I stayed quiet. Let him talk. She fell, in love with someone else, someone close to me. It wasn't just betrayal. It was annihilation. It made me question everything I believed about connection. Touch. Trust. He walked to the shelf, ran his hand along a spine without pulling the book. "I haven't touched anyone since her. Not without knowing I could survive the loss afterward." I felt a weight settle in my chest. He looked at me again. That contract wasn't about control. It was about containment. Containment? I gave myself permission for 60 seconds. 1 hug, 1 minute to feel something, then nothing. More. Because if I planned it, I could end it. I could manage it. But you didn't. He shook his head. No, I didn't. There was something unbearably human in his admission. Not weakness, not apology, vulnerability. And it shook me. I took a step toward him. "Why me?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "Maybe because you walked into my office and looked at me like I wasn't a god or a monster. Just a man." He paused. "Or maybe because when I held you, I felt like I was alive for the first time in years, and I didn't want to stop." He poured a glass of whiskey and offered it to me. I didn't drink it. Instead, I walked to the window and looked out. "You're still afraid?" "Yes, so am I." He was quiet for a long moment. Then softly, "I don't want to hurt you." I turned to him. "Then stop holding back like it's the only way to protect me." He blinked. Just once. Then, without thinking, he moved. Not fast, not desperate, just decisive. He stopped inches away from me. "Tell me to leave," he said, voice low. "I can't," I whispered. Tell me this was a mistake. It wasn't. Then tell me what you're afraid of. I swallowed. That I'll want more, and you'll disappear. He looked down, exhaled slowly, then raised his eyes again. Clear, steady. I'm not leaving. We didn't kiss. Not. Yet we stood there, breathing the same air, tethered by something fragile but real. Not lust. Not a contract. Choice, and I knew, right then, that this wasn't about debts anymore. It wasn't about pity or rescue. It was about two broken people leaning toward the same fire, knowing full well it might burn them both. Later that night, back, in my apartment, I stared at the city from my window and realized something strange. I wasn't scared anymore. Not of him. Not of what he might want from me. But of what I might want back. Because Sebastian Hale was no longer the man who bought a hug. He was the man who let me see the cracks in his armor, and God help me. I wanted to step through them. It started with thunder. Low, distant, like a warning beneath my ribs. The kind of sound that makes you feel something's about to happen. Something you can't stop once it starts. I was already at the penthouse, by the time the rain came down in sheets. Sebastian hadn't called me. I came anyway. Not because I was invited, but because I couldn't stay away. Not after the way he'd looked at me that night. Not after hearing the edge in his voice when, he said, "I'm not leaving." I stood in his hallway, soaked to the skin. He opened the door with that same unreadable calm, but his eyes cracked the silence in half. "You walked here?" he asked, stepping aside. "I needed to," I said, my voice hoarse. "I needed to know if I could face you and still breathe." He didn't answer. He just closed the door, locked it, and turned toward me like gravity had finally snapped. I don't remember who moved first, only that I was against the wall and his hands were on me. Urgent, unyielding. Rain still clung to my dress as it clung to my body, and he didn't hesitate. He yanked the fabric downward in one motion, baring my shoulder, my collarbone, the top of my chest. His mouth followed. I gasped. Not from fear. From shock. How fast it happened. How much I wanted it. His breath was hot on my neck. His stubble scraped my skin in the best kind of way. My fingers reached up, digging into his shirt, pulling him closer. "I told myself not to touch you again," he muttered against my skin. "Told myself I'd ruin you." "You can't ruin something that already broke," I whispered. He froze. Then his mouth crushed mine. It wasn't slow. It wasn't sweet. It was a war of heat and hunger and hands that didn't ask permission anymore. My back hit the wall again, and this time his thigh pressed between mine, parting them, lifting me just enough to steal every breath I had left. Clothes were not removed. They were ripped. The sound of thread tearing echoed louder than the thunder. Outside. His hands were everywhere. My waist, my ribs, the underside of my breast. And then lower. So low I arched into him without shame. I was already trembling when he picked me up. Effortless. He carried me through the open-plan living space, past flickering firelight, to the bedroom like I was something he couldn't afford to drop. He laid me down but didn't pause. His mouth found the space between my thighs like he'd been waiting years for this exact moment. I cried out, loud. He didn't stop, didn't slow. He held me there, firm, focused, until I broke apart in his hands, back arching, fists curled into the sheets. I was still shaking when he hovered above me, sliding out of what little he still wore. Our eyes locked. "Are you sure?" he asked. He was already hard, already pressing at my entrance, but he waited. I began. "I know," he said softly. "That's why I'll go slow." But he didn't. Not really. Because once I nodded, Once I said please, he drove into me in one deep, claiming thrust. I gasped. He held still, letting me adjust, forehead pressed against mine, breath ragged. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. Again. He moved. God, he moved. Slow at first, then deeper, faster, each stroke stealing more of my mind. He kissed me like a man unraveling, touched me like he didn't believe I was real, whispered my name, like it was a prayer and a curse. "Mine," he growled into my ear. I clenched around him. My nails dragged down his back. "Yours." He lost control then. He flipped me onto my stomach, pulled me back against him, took me harder. His fingers dug into my hips, and I gave him everything. No more fear. No more pretense. Only heat. Only want. Only him. When we both came, it was violent, like a storm breaking against stone. My scream was swallowed by his mouth. His moan broke in my name. We collapsed together, sweat and rainwater and sighs. The storm outside had faded, but the one between us was still humming beneath our skin. He wrapped an arm around me, pulling me to his chest. "I didn't mean for this," he said, his voice low. "I just wanted one hug, 1 minute." "You lied," I murmured against his skin. "I know." He kissed my forehead. "I don't want you to leave." "I won't," I meant. It not because of the sex, not because of the heat, but because I'd never felt like this before, with anyone. And deep down, I knew he hadn't either. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I couldn't, because I didn't want to. Lying against Sebastian, my skin still tingling, his hand resting low on my back like a vow, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. But peace is dangerous. It lets you imagine it could last, and I knew better. When I woke, he was already gone. The penthouse was quiet. Too quiet. I walked barefoot through the living room, wrapped in one of his button-downs. The city outside was starting to wake, but this space felt suspended in time, like last night had never happened. Except it had. My body remembered all of it. Every kiss, every thrust, every whisper that didn't sound like a man in control, but like a man surrendering. And I had surrendered too, willingly, fully, maybe too fully. I found a note on the kitchen counter. A single line written in clean, slanted ink. "Had to meet with the board. I'll be back tonight. Don't leave." No heart, no warmth, just instructions. A tremor started in my chest. I reminded myself not to overthink. This was Sebastian Hale, the man who expressed emotion like it cost him blood. A note was practically a sonnet in his language. Still, I didn't like how cold it felt, so I distracted myself, showered, dressed, made coffee I didn't drink. But I couldn't sit still. Something gnawed at me, subtle and sharp, like a thread pulled too tight. I wandered into his study. The door was unlocked. Inside, minimalist decor, glass shelves, dark wood, a massive desk with a state-of-the-art monitor still glowing. I didn't mean to look at the screen, but my eyes landed on it anyway. Emails, open and highlighted at the top, a message from his executive assistant. Subject, Aurora Tran. Status? Assuming she's still playing the part. Either way, your instinct was right. First-timers always get attached. I froze. The words blurred, playing the part. First-timers get attached. My lungs stopped working. My chest clenched like it couldn't contain what had just detonated inside me. I didn't read anything else. I didn't need to. I stumbled out of the office, heart pounding, blood cold. By the time Sebastian came home that night, I was packed. Found me standing by the door, coat on, bag in hand. Aurora, he said, alarm flickering behind his eyes. Where are you going? I held up my phone. The screen showed the email, his face drained of color. You went through my files. No, I said. I walked into your study and it was just there, open, like a landmine waiting to go off. He stepped forward. That email wasn't. What? I snapped. Wasn't about how you set me up? How I'm just some predictable virgin who got attached so easily? He winced. It was subtle, but I saw it, and that told me enough. I laughed, bitter. You had a plan, didn't you? 1 hug, 1 minute. And if I broke? Well, that's on me. It's not like that. Then tell me how it is. I didn't expect to care, he said quietly. And you think that helps? He exhaled through his nose, dragging a hand down his face. I was trying to protect you. No, I said, voice shaking. You were protecting yourself. From the moment we met. You made me sign my dignity away on paper and called it kindness. You thought if you controlled every second, it wouldn't feel real. But guess what? I stepped closer, eyes burning. It felt real to me. His jaw tightened. It was real. Then why did you let them talk about me like I was some experiment? Silence. That was all I needed. I walked past him. His hand shot out, lightning fast, and grabbed my wrist. Don't, he said. Not a command, a plea. I looked up at him, and for the first time, he looked scared. Not angry, not cold, just broken. Didn't plan this, he whispered. I didn't expect to beg, but I'm begging now. My chest cracked, because I wanted to believe him. But some things, once said, can't be unsaid. Some wounds bleed quiet. I pulled my wrist free and left. Outside, the rain had started again. Because of course it had. The city blurred as I walked. People passed me without seeing me. Just another girl with a suitcase and a storm in her heart. Didn't cry, not until I reached my apartment. And even then, only when the door closed behind me. Only when I knew he couldn't see. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what had happened, trying to remind myself of the truth. This had started as a transaction. I signed the contract. I agreed to the terms. But love doesn't care about terms. It doesn't sign agreements or follow rules. And once you give your body to someone, you don't just give skin. You give breath, memory, hope. I had given him everything. And now all I had left was a suitcase and a silence I didn't know how to fill. Sebastian Hale didn't beg. Not in business. Not in war. Not in love. Until now. 3 days after she left, he was standing outside a small tailor shop in Queens, soaked to the bone, staring at a closed sign through a rain-blurred window. The place was dark. So was he. He hadn't shaved. Hadn't eaten more than coffee and regret since Aurora walked out the door. He'd read her name in every email, heard her voice in the static between phone calls, smelled her skin in every shirt she used to touch. It was driving him mad. But he deserved it, because he let her go thinking she meant less than she did, because he'd hidden behind silence, behind contracts and calculated touches, instead of saying the only thing that ever mattered, stay. Earlier that day, he'd fired his assistant, not for the email, for the tone. You don't get to talk about her like that, he'd said, jaw clenched so tightly it ached. Not to me, not ever. Then he'd locked himself in his office and read every message he'd ever sent Aurora. All the things he didn't say stared back louder than the ones he had. He couldn't run a company. Not when the one person who made him feel human had vanished. From his world like a dream he didn't deserve to keep. Now he stood in the cold, under the soft glow of the shop's hand-painted signage, wondering how something so small could hold so much of his soul. A woman passed by under an umbrella. paused, looked at him once, quickly turned away. Because people don't expect to see billionaires standing alone in the rain. People don't expect to see Sebastian Hale broken. He stayed until his shoes were soaked through. Then he turned, and she was there. Aurora. Standing on the sidewalk, holding a grocery bag, looking like the wind had knocked the air from her lungs the second she saw him. Neither of them moved. The city swirled around them. Then, slowly, she walked forward. One step, then another, until they were face to face in the middle of a quiet block, where everything else faded. "You're soaked," she said, voice barely a whisper. "I didn't want to miss you," he replied. "Why?" "Because I can't lose you." She swallowed. Hard. "Sebastian." "No," he said, shaking his head. "Don't do the thing where you pretend it didn't mean anything. Don't protect me from the fallout. I built this. I ruined it. I know." Her throat worked. But she stayed silent. He stepped closer, eyes locked on hers. "I'm sorry," he said, and his voice cracked. "I thought I could handle feeling again in small doses, controlled doses, 1 hug, 1 minute. But the truth is," he trailed off, chest heaving once. Then he dropped to his knees. Right there, in the rain, in front of her. "I've never needed anyone the way I need you." She stared down at him, stunned. This man who had built an empire. This man who never kneeled for anything. On his knees. For her. "Get up," she said, voice shaking. "People are staring." "I don't care," he replied, still looking up at her like she was the only solid thing in a collapsing world. "You're the only one I'd kneel for, and I'm doing it because I never want you to question if I mean it." A breath shuddered out of her, then another. She reached down, touched his face. "You're an idiot," she whispered. "I know. You hurt me." "I know. I still love you." He exhaled like he hadn't breathed in days. She pulled him to his feet and kissed him. Not the kind of kiss that explodes like fireworks. The kind that settles in your bones and says, "We're still here." He held her close, arms wrapped around her like armor. No contracts, no rules, no clock ticking in the background. Just warmth, rain, and forgiveness. They stood there until the street emptied, until the sky softened from gray to gold, until the cold didn't matter, and the past didn't own them anymore. When she finally pulled back, she looked up at him and asked softly, "Are you still afraid?" He nodded. "Yes." "So am I," she smiled. "Then maybe we do this afraid. Together." That night, they didn't make love. They didn't need to. They just held each other under the covers like that first hug had never ended. And when he whispered mine into her hair, she whispered back, "Not because of a contract. Because I choose you." 1 year later, the hug was still happening. Not literally. We weren't still locked in each other's arms. Life had resumed, moved forward, got messy. But in the quiet moments, when he brushed my hair off my forehead while I was half asleep, or when I set a coffee on his desk without a word, it was still there, that moment. That heat, that impossible, improbable beginning. The tailor shop had reopened in a new space. Bigger, brighter, mine. I'd kept the name, Tran and Thread. Clients came in with couture dreams and crooked zippers, and I gave them both what they needed, because I finally believed I had something worth giving. And every Thursday at 5:30, without fail, Sebastian walked through the door with a torn button, a wrinkled collar, or absolutely nothing wrong at all. He just wanted to see me with pins in my mouth and chalk on my fingertips. Still pretending to need repairs? I teased him once. He didn't flinch, just looked at me with that same storm-softened stare and said, "Always." At night, we lived in something quieter than passion, but deeper than comfort. We learned how to argue without weaponizing silence, how to kiss without needing to conquer, how to make space for each other's damage without making it disappear. And, some nights, on the couch, wrapped in his arms with the city glowing outside, we remembered where we began. "I still think about that first hug," I said once. His hand tightened around my waist. "It should have ruined me. But you didn't destroy me, Aurora. You rebuilt me, one touch at a time. There were days we struggled. His instincts still leaned toward control. Mine still leaned toward disappearing when I got overwhelmed. But we kept choosing each other, even when it was hard. Especially then. On the anniversary of the day I signed that contract, he took me to the same chapel where we'd faked our wedding. This time, it was full of light, flowers, people we actually loved. He stood beside me, in the same dark suit, but nothing else about him was the same. His walls were gone. His voice, when he said "I do," wasn't cool or collected. It was trembling, real. And when he kissed me this time, it wasn't a breaking of rules. It was a promise. Later, curled against him in bed, his voice rumbling low in my ear, he asked, "Do you regret signing it, the contract?" He nodded. I smiled into his chest. "No, it brought me here. You gave up everything just to hug a stranger." I tilted my face up to meet his eyes. "I didn't give up everything. I gave you a minute. You gave me forever. We didn't need fireworks after that. No grand declarations, no drama, just steady breaths, tangled sheets, and his hand in mine while we fell asleep to the sound of rain, and when he whispered, 'Mine.' I didn't whisper back. I said it out loud, clear, certain, forever. If this story moved you, even, just a little, like, subscribe and stay with us. There's more where that came from. More hearts to break, more love to heal, and always more stories worth feeling.